Hey, Nicole, so great to speak to you again. So excited you can join us today.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
We're talking a lot about a data-driven approach and to optimizing a sales process, and I just love all the things you and your team have been implementing recently. But before we dive in, tell us a little bit more about your role in your organization.
Well, first of all, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk about all the cool things we're doing at NielsenIQ. It's such an exciting time. So, just really excited to be here to share some of that with you. I lead global revenue operations at NielsenIQ, and alongside my team, it's my mission to really make sure that we're enabling healthy revenue generation throughout the entire life cycle for both new and existing streams of revenue. We do that in a way that's designed to drive efficiency and effectiveness for our sellers. We think about healthy revenue generation as making sure we're doing things all the way at the top of the funnel to really help generate quality leads, and then following that through to a closed won deal with really an operationally sound and enabled approach for our sellers.
And I think it fits into everything we've been talking about today and really focusing on how we can use data to better ourselves in all elements of our revenue cycle. I know that you've been really focused on systemizing Nielsen IQ's sales process, but I thought it might be helpful to first start with the why behind making these changes. People are so focused on how much harder it is to sell these days, but you have a different thought process, which is that buying is harder. Can you explain what you mean by this?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Amanda. If you think about how hard it's gotten to sell with the advent of so much virtual activity, think about it from the perspective of a buyer. It's gotten even harder for our buyers. Buyers are bombarded with so much more information than they've ever had before, with almost a disregard for where they're at in their buying cycle or what they're actually out there trying to buy. And so we are trying to enable our sellers to meet the buyers where they're at in that buying cycle. We want our buyers to love Nielsen IQ sellers because they're providing the right solution at the right point in time with the right message that resonates for them. And if we can help them do all of that with this systemized approach to selling, we think we're really enabling our sellers to be much more successful.
I love that you said that. That just aligns with how we believe it at Salesloft. It's our vision that we want to empower our sellers to be sellers that buyers love. So it's so aligned to how we approach things as well. I know exactly what you're talking about from a buyer perspective. You know, my inbox is flooded constantly with all sorts of emails, even sometimes things that aren't relevant to my role at all. I got a facilities management email the other day and I'm like, that isn't anything I'm responsible for. So even just finding what is actually relevant to my day to day is a struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. I just recently got asked to participate in the purchase of some surveys around new CPG product innovation, which is very far removed from revenue operations and my team's remit. So I get it. We're just being flooded with so much and across so many different vehicles.
100% yes. So when you think about selling from a buyer's point of view, it really changes the approach of your sales process. What were the key items or attributes that you wanted to focus on?
Yeah, the biggest one for us was consistency in our approach to selling. This was the genesis for us of what we call our sales play system. There are a lot of benefits for sellers, but we also think there are a lot of benefits for our buyers in coming forward and coming to market with a really consistent approach. It allows us to understand the persona we're selling to really get the right message for the place that buyer is at in their buying cycle, and to deliver a consistent approach. The biggest benefit that we've seen in delivering this consistent approach is that we're able to decompose our deals in a new way as well. Because when all of our sellers are out there using the same materials and tracking in the same way, it's a lot easier for us to understand what's working and why we're winning, but also in many ways, more importantly, why we're not winning. And that point in the sales cycle where something is occurring that's disengaging our buyers and leading us to a lost deal.
I think that's so powerful to think about. I know when I'm working with other sales teams, it's a lost thought of intentionality or consistency that we often just forget about. We could be the best sellers in the world, totally authentic, writing the right emails, sending the right messaging, really adding value to our buyers. But if we're not doing consistently or with an intentionality, we're not measuring, and we really don't know what's resonating with our buyers and what's working. So it's impossible to then track or optimize in the future.
I couldn't agree with you more. If you're not intentional about how you're selling, you're never going to cut through the clutter. We are getting hundreds of emails and social media connects and texts and phone calls. And the only ones that break through are the ones that are relevant at that point in time when you're looking to make a decision about something in a purchase cycle.
So consistency is key to this entire process. I have to ask, how did Salesloft fit into these new plans of yours?
Yeah, that's by far the easiest question to answer that you've asked so far, Amanda, because Salesloft has really become foundational to everything that we're doing in our sales play system. Of course, we always focused on top of funnel activity. We, as sellers, we have an understanding that we have to generate activity to be able to get deals into our sales cycle and to move them through the sales cycle. But historically, we haven't had a consistent way of tracking and measuring that activity and tying it directly back to our results at the other end of the revenue funnel. And so by leveraging Salesloft as a critical part of our sales play system, we are now tracking all of that activity and understanding just how many calls, texts, emails, connects it takes to get someone into a sales cycle. And then in terms of writing that back to our CRM, we're also tracking how many activities it takes to move that buyer through the sales cycle to get the result that we want at the other end.
I'm just thinking about this. We've established why we need to make the change, how we want to make the change, but then comes the hard part, which is actually implementing it. I work with a lot of sellers, and I'm guilty of this too. I think anytime you hear, well, we want to systemize your sales process or how you go to market, I could see a lot of pushback or saying, hey, don't put me in that box. Have you run into that, or how did you manage that change as you were implementing this?
That's such a good question. I mean, they say change is hard for a reason. It's just really hard. One of the first questions we get every time we talk to a new set of sellers about implementing the sales play system is, hey, is this going to take away my mojo? Is this really going to limit me and how I can sell? And I don't really want that systemized approach. And first things first, I would say there's got to be room for sellers to be themselves in every process and every approach. And of course, our system accounts for that. But the other thing that I would say is that we were at a pretty pivotal point in our transformation where we had a sales force that was really hungry for change. They were looking for a modern approach, and they were looking for a new way of doing things. They wanted to sell, but they needed to be enabled in a different way. And so by taking a step back and really systematizing our approach, we were able to take a lot of the guesswork out of it for our sellers. So instead of spending time calling their friends and fellow sellers for the latest pitch deck or whatever that money slide was that someone used in their last sales cycle, they were able to have a set of curated materials in one spot. And rather than asking permission from other account development or customer success teams around the organization, they had a social contract with each other through our account planning process that said, this is how we're going to approach this customer. This is who owns the relationship. And this is the role each of us will play in supporting this sales cycle from start to finish. So yeah, there was a lot of change management in doing that. And we had to tackle a lot of training and a lot of getting people to shift their mindset. But as soon as our first sales play launched and we started seeing our pipeline growing, I mean, with our first play, we saw 3 times the pipeline that we had expected to see because of this social contract and this commitment to winning together. Every seller wants a sufficient pipeline. So getting that data in front of our sellers, seeing the sales cycle start to shorten, there was no doubt that they were ready to embrace this and really tackle more and more plays as we built out our system.
Yeah, it absolutely is a mindset shift. And I think one of the ways I like to describe it is we're giving you road signs or lanes in your road. We're not telling you or driving the car for you, right? We're just telling you where to go and helping you prioritize and get somewhere as efficiently or as quickly as possible. So I think if we can make sure that we're giving that message that buyers buy from real people, You are the seller. You're going to be the one making that sale. We're just helping you or guiding you along. It can go a long way.
That's exactly right. You can still bring your personality to the deal itself, but help us by staying in these lanes so that we can really, again, decompose our wins and losses and get more predictability into our pipeline and forecasting processes.
So when you're talking about that decomposition, as you started executing the new strategy, what were early signs or trends or performance indicators that you were looking at to start to measure this?
Yeah, I mean, the overarching measure of success for us is revenue per FTE. So if we're really making our sellers more efficient and more effective, we want to see that revenue start to rise on a per FTE basis. And we think that's reasonable because if you're shortening the sales cycle and you're increasing the win rate, then you better also be accelerating your growth. Those things go hand in hand. But for us, honestly, it's more than that too, because we wanted a better experience for our sellers. We want to be a top tier. We actually want to be the number one place for sellers to come to work every day. And sellers want to sell. So if we're enabling our sellers to sell more effectively and more efficiently, and we're doing that through reducing a lot of the non-selling stuff that they need to do to find success, we think will also drive just inherently engagement for our sellers, which is so important to us as an organization.
Yeah, I don't think I've met a lot of sellers that I want to build slide decks or email templates all day. I don't think that's their favorite thing to do. Maybe some people are really into it, but I think it's more of, hey, I actually want to get out there, talk to people, right? And actually start showing some value there. Okay, so now the fun part, you get to start seeing some results. I know that you all are only about, a quarter in on this new strategy, but what are some early wins that you've seen out of this?
Yeah, so I started to mention that we've seen early indicators that we're reducing our cycle time in the sales process. And that's huge. That's huge for us. Having that consistent approach and really kind of getting one set of resources for our sellers has helped us reduce the time that the sellers are spending outside of the sales cycle. So that's been, from a quantitative side, a really big first step forward. We've also seen a big jump in our pipeline. We, using our CRM, are able to track, pre-sales play and post-sales play launch sales activity, and our opportunities and the size of our opportunities that are being generated are around 3 times greater than what was happening before we launched our sales play. So those things are all awesome. I have to also say that the sales plays have enabled us to reach out to hundreds of new customers because, again, we have a rote approach to getting out there in the market and delivering that message. So quantitatively, all of those things are trending in the right direction, and we're excited to see how far we can take it over the months to come. But I would say it's working qualitatively as well because we've seen this culture shift. And those sellers that very early on were saying, oh, I don't, this takes away kind of the unique thing that I bring to the table, are now saying, wow, I am able to leave work that I no longer need to do behind and focus on truly being engaged with my customer. So transformationally, we're driving the right culture shift and mindset shift and really bringing a new era of sales support into NielsenIQ.
I think that gets left out a lot. We talk about revenue numbers, and of course, that's what we all care about the most, right? Are we driving to that revenue? Are we being more effective and getting there quicker? But the impact it can have on your sales culture overall, and that kind of catches on, right? If we have happy sellers that are being successful, that becomes a really great place to work and sell and collaborate with each other, and just can, I think, exponentially start to add more value to the organization. So thanks for calling that out.
Yeah, we talk a lot about happy buyers are the ones that buy, but happy sellers are the ones that are more successful as well.
Any advice that you could give to anybody that is maybe perhaps hesitant to take on a project like this? I think, obviously the numbers show for themselves 3 times is incredible and only a quarter, but it still is a good bit of work, a lot of research, probably a lot of collaboration across different teams. Where do you start?
Yeah, I would say you have to start by really taking in a self-assessment and understanding just how mature and how productive your sales force is. You have to understand how much time your sellers are spending away from their customers. And for us, that was a very, very sizable amount. So when we looked at that big elephant that we could go tackle, right? It became easier to think about the bite-sized pieces that we could implement as a part of this culture shift to really embrace change and drive a different result as a result of that change. And so we asked ourselves whether or not our sellers had the right tools, whether they had processes that supported efficient selling. And for us, a lot of those answers came back mixed. So we knew we had an opportunity to go tackle something and do something different. I would also ask yourself if you've got the right infrastructure in place. We spent a solid 6 months on infrastructure before we ever even built our first sales play to make sure that we had the right people ready to go. And then we also had the right enablement platform with tools like Salesloft to be able to drive the change we wanted to change.
A couple of things stood out. First, the taking time to be intentional and plan around the structure that you need to even pull this off, I think is a really good callback. Don't just dive in and get started with a new process without taking that time to build that foundation. The other thing that really struck a chord with me was this idea of sales maturity, and one, assessing where you are, but also taking a realistic approach to where you're going to be in a certain amount of time. I tell customers all the time, if we look like at a sales maturity curve, we want to get way over here, we're probably over here, but you know what? If we just get one step further, that's huge returns and wins for your team. And you can build and optimize that over time. Whereas if you try and go for the full, most magical sales process where we're all seasoned, well-oiled machine using all the automation and everything, sometimes it's so hard that and unattainable, you just end up quitting and not getting any results at all. So love that kind of baby steps approach.
Yeah.
Well, I wish we had more time. This has been so great. I could talk about this for hours, but I think we've had enough time to come up with 3 key takeaways. First, when creating a new selling process, focus on your buyers, not your sellers. I think that's a really important one. Think about what's valuable to them and how they want to be sold to. I think the second is consistency and intentionality are key to understanding and measuring results. We don't know what we don't know. We've got to make sure that we put in a process so that we can start to measure that. And then finally, establishing the process is just the first step. True success is going to come over time as we start measuring, iterating, and optimizing. It's a garden. We have to grow it and maintain it over time. We're not just going to do it one time and walk away from it. Anything else you think that we could take away from this?
You know what? I would say have fun with it. It's sales. People come to a sales organization because they're driven, they enjoy interacting with people, and they enjoy driving that human engagement. And so even though we've taken a really systematic approach to selling, we have a lot of fun with it through, just recording pitches and sharing around wins and getting together each week to celebrate what's working and review what's not. So definitely don't miss the opportunity to continue to have fun throughout the sales cycle.
There you go. Systemizing processes is fun. Everybody join in. Well, thanks again, Nicole. We just appreciate your time and your partnership. We're so grateful for your wisdom and you being willing to share that with us today.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It was awesome to be here.